The global south.
Global South.
Global South.
The Global South.
A phrase that is gaining prominence in many international forums is Global South. Everyone is talking about Global South, starting from World Bank, IMF, US President Joe Biden, Indian PM Narendra Modi, and many more. So what exactly is Global South? Its importance in world affairs, and how India can play a vital role in shaping this grouping's framework and goals in the coming times. We'll discuss all this in detail in this video. Hello guys, I am Saurav and welcome to the Arc. Though the term Global South sounds like a geographical divide, it isn't one. Not exactly. Because countries like India, China, and the countries in the northern half of Africa that are included in the Global South actually lie to the north of the equator. Similarly, countries such as Australia and New Zealand, both in the southern hemisphere, are not part of the Global South. So the Global South can be described as countries lying south to this line, called the Brandt Line, starting from north of Mexico in the west, running eastward towards Africa, north of Middle East in Asia, then crossing north of India and China, dropping down in East Asia, excluding Japan, Australia and New Zealand. This line was proposed by former German Chancellor Willy Brandt in the 1980s, depicting the North-South divide based on per capita GDP of countries. The definition is not very precise, but Global South consists of countries that identify themselves as developing versus the developed Global North. These countries are commonly referred as the G77 plus China in the United Nations, though the coalition now consists of 134 countries. Another common thread that binds the countries together is at some point of time in recent history, these countries have been subjected to imperialism and colonial rule. To understand the significance of the grouping, we need to understand what binds them together, their common cause, and how it's going to shape the world affairs in the coming times. During the Cold War era, there were essentially two poles of power. One was led by the US, that consisted of advanced capitalist nations, which were referred to as First World countries. The second pole was socialist nations, led by the Soviet Union, called the Second World countries. The rest of the countries that chose the path of non-alignment were referred to as Third World countries. The Third World was essentially less industrialized, poverty-stricken, and still recovering from colonial wars. But after dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, the Second World ceased to exist, and Global South slowly started to take prominence in discourse. Global South became more acceptable post-1991 as Third World sounded derogatory and was associated mostly with banana republics plagued with poverty and lawlessness. So the gaining popularity of the Global South was in a way mellowing down the disdain towards the less developed world, especially by the Western media. As the economies of the countries in the Global South developed, their relevance on the world stage grew. But where exactly does the Global South stand today? If we compare the GDP in terms of purchasing power of the Global South dominated BRICS nations, that is Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, it already surpasses that of the Global North's affluent G7 club. By 2030, it is projected that world's four largest economies would be China, India, the US and Indonesia. 3 out of the 4 from Global South. At the August summit of the BRICS nations, the chair of the summit, South Africa, declared its goal was to advance the agenda of the Global South. Another landmark decision taken this year was expansion of the BRICS grouping, with Argentina, Egypt, Iran, Ethiopia, UAE and Saudi Arabia officially joining the group in January 2024, all from the Global South. And ahead of this year's summit of the group of 7 wealthy democracies, known as the G7, in Hiroshima, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida also stressed the importance of the Global South. The West's tendency to abuse the prevailing international systems as per its own convenience is primarily responsible for the growing discontent among the Global South countries against the established global mechanisms. It became apparent when many leading countries in Africa, Asia, South America refused to stand with NATO over the war in Ukraine. There is a growing frustration over increased fuel, fertilizer and food prices because of the war. And countries in the Global South that are facing these challenges are annoyed that the war has taken more prominence over these crises, and the international organizations are not doing enough to address this.
It is
however, an undeniable reality that the international system remains dominated by the global north. As we saw the COVID pandemic take a horrific toll across the world, the need to focus on developing countries has become more compelling. If that was not enough, the consequences of the Ukraine conflict for global food, energy and fertilizer security has added to complexities. The global south was largely reduced to being a consumer rather than a producer. They not only did not reap the full benefits of economic change, but often ended up saddled with unviable debts emanating from opaque initiatives.
The accusations against the West are that it's not sympathetic towards the global south's needs and aspirations, and it stems from the West's lack of understanding of the challenges and ground realities of the global south. The West thinks it's the custodian of values and rules-based order, disregarding the global south's challenges. Yet the West itself bends the rules as per convenience.
Somewhere Europe has to grow out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems, but the world's problems are not Europe's problems. That if it is you, it's yours, if it is me, it's ours.
Amusingly, the global south countries have many contradictions, and it's very difficult for all the countries to agree on one common agenda. But all of them unite in their resentment towards the global north, especially the West. The recent crude oil transaction under the local currency settlement system with Indian rupees between India and the United Arab Emirates is a signal that more and more countries want to reduce their dependence on the US dollar. The anger and distrust against the West have created a void to be filled by alternate organizations such as BRICS. But the question remains, who's going to lead the global south? China desperately seeks to expand its sphere of influence and create a new world order, but there are suspicions regarding China's intentions that it could misuse the grouping to push its own agenda while claiming to be speaking for the global south. China's Belt and Road Initiative is one such example where China has invested in countries and projects that the conventional international financial institutions would not have invested in. At the same time, the very same projects have become debt traps for the poor countries, causing economic distress. On the other hand, India is very uniquely positioned to become the leader of the global south. India enjoys good relations with the West and Russia at the same time. Russia is India's old ally, and the India-US partnership has grown significantly in recent times. India is part of the Quad grouping and also of the BRICS. India wants to take advantage of these unique circumstances to position itself as the voice of the global south. In January this year, India hosted a special virtual summit called the Voice of Global South Summit. Leaders and ministers from 125 countries of the global south participated in the summit. The primary purpose of the summit was to find common cause and make voices of these countries heard, and India's role in doing so.
We, the global south, have the largest stakes in the future. 3/4 of humanity lives in our countries. We should also have equivalent voice. Hence, at the 8-decade-old model of global governance slowly changes, we should try to shape the emerging order.
India believes that the concerns of the developing world do not receive adequate attention and space on the global stage. Also, the existing systems have proven to be ineffective in addressing these concerns and challenges of the developing countries.
In the last century, we supported each other in our fight against foreign rule. We can do it again in this century to create a new world order that will ensure the welfare of our citizens. As far as India is concerned, your voice is India's voice. Your priorities are India's priorities.
Then in May this year, the third edition of the Forum for India-Pacific Islands Cooperation or FIPIC Summit was held in Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea. The Pacific Island countries are a group of islands in the Pacific Ocean, west of the US and east and northeast of Australia. And FIPIC is a grouping developed for cooperation between India and 14 Pacific Island countries.
Whilst our land may be small and number may be small, our area and space in Pacific is big. The world uses it for trade, commerce and movement. We are victims of global power play. We want you to be an advocate for us as you sit in those meetings and continue to fight for the rights of small emerging nations and emerging economies. But more importantly, the issues that are facing the Pacific Island nations, especially the smaller ones amongst us, are heard in its right context and given support by you, the leader of the Global South. And I put to you as the leader of the third realm, the third group, the third block of nations that must emerge. Those are the emerging nations, and we will rally behind your leadership at global forums.
These island countries may be small in size, but they are very important strategically. The countries reposing their faith in India to become the voice and leader of the Global South is a huge deal. The next big thing related to this happened in the G20 summit this year. India has been advocating for increased participation and say of African countries in major global forums. India's efforts were successful when the African Union, that represents 55 countries, got full membership of the G20 at the New Delhi summit this year. Earlier, South Africa was the only member from the entire African continent. India also played a vital role in supplying COVID-19 vaccines to underdeveloped countries from Africa, Caribbean island countries, Pacific Islands and many more, despite its own challenges. As world's largest democracy, fifth largest economy and now the most populous country, India believes it deserves a permanent seat at the UN Security Council. Support of the countries from the Global South for India will be crucial when the UN Security Council is reformed, and India has received tremendous goodwill and support from these countries.
And I think the stars have aligned for India. India now has a seat at the table, and India is taking us on board. I want India to know that the rest of the Global South is with you.
The fact that India itself, as a developing country, extends the hand of friendship to us is something that we are eternally grateful for. But yet you have taken the opportunity to reach out to us. I personally want to thank you, the people and government of India, for reaching out to us at a time of such need. That we believe that India is emerging as a very important player in global affairs. And we believe that India deserves to have a permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council.
But India has not forgotten the other countries. This is not a country saying, bye-bye now, I am going to the decision-making table. India is bringing the Global South together at the decision-making table.
St. Lucia looks to India as the nation which has stepped forward to find a middle ground in the East-West, North-South divide, to build the necessary bridges, command respect, and have something to show for it. As the world continues to witness the redistribution of power, India is increasingly taking its rightful place in this multipolar world. The rest is inevitable. India is rising rapidly, and nothing can stop India right now. But India is also taking us along to the promised land. May God continue to bless India.
The fact of the matter is, the established global systems, despite their flaws, are here to stay. But it's also true that, if not a new world order, an alternative world order, and a post-Western world is an inevitability. And India can play a vital role in shaping and leading that, taking the Global South along. Thanks for watching. Please support our efforts by liking, sharing and subscribing. Thank you.